Today, we're going to dive into a chapter of American history that's, well, it's pretty stunning and honestly, way too short-lived. It's about the very first time black legislators walked the halls of Congress.
Okay, I want you to picture this. It's 1870. The Civil War, that just ended 5 years ago, so the wounds are still incredibly fresh. The U.S. Capitol is just buzzing, you know? It's this mix of tension and hope. The whole country is trying to figure out who it's going to be.
And right into the middle of all that, a new senator from Mississippi steps up. He's about to be sworn in. He's a black man, a well-respected minister, an educator. But here's the kicker, the part of the story that's just mind-blowing. It's not just who he is, it's whose seat he's about to take. Get this, Jefferson Davis, that Jefferson Davis, the former president of the Confederacy, he was taking his seat. I mean, you literally couldn't write a more dramatic twist. It has to be one of the most powerful and ironic moments in all of American history.
So you've got to be wondering, right? How on earth did something so revolutionary happen? Well, it all came out of this really brief, really radical, and incredibly hopeful period of change that we now call Reconstruction.
Think about how fast things were moving. In just 5 years after the war, bam, 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 the entire legal foundation of America gets a rewrite. First, the 13th Amendment comes in and abolishes slavery. Then, the 14th grants citizenship and equal protection. And then, the 15th gives black men the right to vote. These 3 amendments completely changed what it meant to be an American citizen.
So this whole period, right, from 1865 to 1877, that's the Reconstruction era. And it wasn't just about, rebuilding cities or infrastructure. No, it was way bigger than that. It was this massive nationwide attempt to actually build a multiracial democracy for the very first time.
And of course, into this brand new, kind of fragile world, a whole generation of trailblazers stepped up. These were the folks who were going to test the promises of these new amendments. They were the pioneers ready to smash through barriers that had been up for centuries. Let's meet 2 of the men who were right at the front of the line. You've got Hiram Revels from Mississippi, the guy who took Jefferson Davis's Senate seat. And over in the House of Representatives, you had Joseph Rainey from South Carolina. And just look at their backgrounds. It shows you how massive this change was. Revels was a minister born free. Rainey, he had been enslaved. And they took these new roles incredibly seriously. In his very first speech, Senator Revels didn't come out swinging with vengeance. Nope. He set a tone of reconciliation, of unity. He actually argued to restore rights for former Confederates just to make it crystal clear that he was there to represent everyone.
Now, it's so important to remember this. Revels and Rainey, they were just the beginning. This wasn't a fluke. They were the vanguard of a real, genuine political movement, a wave of change that was bringing brand new voices into the halls of power.
So just how big was this wave? The number is 16. That's right, between 1870 and 1877, 16 black men served in the U.S. Congress. Let that sink in. For a country that was only a few years removed from slavery, that level of representation was a flat-out political revolution. And these guys weren't just warming seats in Congress. Not at all. They were in the thick of it, fighting for the most critical issues of the day. They were pushing for federal protection against the KKK. They were working to set up public schools for all kids. And they were demanding equal justice under the law. But, and you knew there was a but coming, this incredible progress led to an equally incredible backlash. As black political power grew, so did the violent organized push to crush it. And that brings us to the next chapter, the end of this era, and the rise of something its supporters ominously called redemption.
It was swift, it was brutal, and it was total. All that progress, all that hope, it was all about to be systematically torn down.
So how did it all fall apart? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was an attack from all sides. First, you had the raw violence from white supremacist groups. Then, that violence gets written into law with Jim Crow segregation. At the same time, the Supreme Court starts chipping away at federal protections. And the final nail in the coffin? That was a political deal in 1877, the one that pulled federal troops out of the South, basically leaving this new world completely unprotected. Fast forward to 1901. The last of these pioneers, a congressman from North Carolina named George Henry White, is giving his farewell speech. He knows the dream is over, at least for now. But he leaves his colleagues, and really the whole country, with this incredibly defiant, prophetic message of hope, a promise of a future return. And you know what? He was right. Their time in power was tragically cut short. But their legacy? That wasn't erased. Not by a long shot. They planted seeds. Seeds for a struggle. that would keep growing for generations to come.
But just look at this timeline. It really shows you how long and hard the road ahead was. After Reconstruction ended, it took more than 50 years, 50, for another black person to get elected to Congress, and almost a full century before another black senator walked the same halls as Hiram Revels. A century.
So, at the end of the day, why does this story matter so much? Why is it so important to remember? Because they proved it could be done. They showed everyone that black Americans could lead and lead effectively at the very highest levels of government. They became these powerful symbols of hope, and they set a precedent that would, decades later, help inspire the civil rights movement. And maybe that's the most important lesson here. This whole incredible era of political power. It lasted for just over a decade. That's it. And then it was snuffed out. It's such a powerful reminder of how quickly the tide of history can turn. Which leaves us with a really big question to think about. What does their story teach us about how progress is won, and maybe more importantly, how easily it can be lost?